So, hello all. I have only 15 minutes to go through this, but quite honestly, we could spend a couple of hours on it easily. This was the formative homework I had you prepare, and you will be doing this in the future with both Bradbury and 150 Years. Here is the highway, the road highway, the concrete highway. And here, Bradbury mentions in the beginning this other highway, the river over here. The first thing that we need to remember is that even though I've created tables that separate these different literary devices, you always need to remember that they all touch on each other at some point. They all influence the other. One leads to the other, to the other, to the other. It's like a house. All parts of it eventually need to be put together and fit together. So, even though I have them in different boxes over here, it's really easy to see how one can contribute to the other, and this one can contribute to that one, etc. So, let's begin with characterization. In this story, you need to identify the main characters. Now, some of you have included Hernando's wife, but she plays a very small part and doesn't have a name. The only one with a name is Hernando over here. And the only other characters that we really meet are these Americans in the car. I'll come back to this in just a moment, but let me just say why these characters are there, why he chose them to be there. Well, they represent a clash, a culture clash, right, between the panicked Americans struggling to get up back home and Hernando that's just a very relaxed in his home. Nothing has changed. Everything is very much status quo, normal for him. These two sets of characters create an important contrast. Again, they're in a panic. They're crying. They're all worried. You know, they're yelling. The world is ending. The world is ending. The war has started. The war is ending. Hernando's really quite a contrast to them. Here, you need to remember that Bradbury wrote in the early 1950s, and most of his readers are North American. Okay, now he chose our narrator to be Hernando, this poor northern Mexican farmer living in the middle of nowhere. He's the one who's narrating the story. What does it mean to narrate a story? When somebody tells you a story, really, you're watching their view and their vision of the world. It's the events that happened through their eyes. And this point of view is going to be extremely important when we come to the theme of the story. It's his point of view. Okay? We'll come back to that later on. When it comes to the plot, you need to understand what happened in the story. Okay? The story is a fairly basic story. That, I mean, you can read this if you like. I'm not going to read it now. We don't have a lot of time. I expect you already to know that. But the climax occurs at this point when Hernando meets these 6 people in a car. Again, they're also nameless. That's our climax, this confrontation, this clash between the two worlds. And as Hernando gives them some water, help them go on into back home because the war has started. And the ending is extremely significant when, even though these people are in a big rush to get back home because the nuclear war has started, his wife says what happens, and he says nothing. And what do they mean? The world. What do they mean? The world. And that's going to bring us back to our theme in a couple of minutes. Now, when it comes to the genre for Bradbury uses, I want you to reflect on how and why Bradbury uses science fiction. So he uses science fiction to bring us to a near or far future. So the belt is a far future, but the highway is a near future, but it's still a future. And this future is presented to the audience, to the readers, to have us reflect on the present. So basically he's saying, look, this is how things could be, good or bad. So let's think about that right now. How can we avoid that, and what can we do to avoid, or if it's a negative dystopian thing, or to get there if it's a more positive kind of thing. This sci-fi, in terms of the atomic bomb in this case, is an exaggeration, okay? So it's something extreme that's happening. I mean, a nuclear war is pretty much the war to end all wars. And this extremity, this exaggeration, makes the potential of that reality very clear in the mind of a reader. It engages that fear of them and makes us all the more think about, oh, I do not want that. What do I have to do? What is Bradbury communicating to me? How does it contribute to the story? Well, this genre, as we said, the sci-fi is taking place, in this case, in the near future. It contributes to the story by making the readers relate more in one way or to another what's happening. So the tourists and the cars and the cameras and everything is something people can relate to. And that contributes to the story to make it all more real to them, except, of course, for this nuclear bomb and war. Now, how does it influence the reader in this case? Well, it influences us, this genre influences us by creating the fear, by making things real to us, but also by using Hernando, okay, and we get influenced, by his vision of things. And the Americans, we get influenced by their vision of things and their panic as well. That's related to science fiction because they're panicking because there's a nuclear war, and he's not. And that influences the reader as well, either creating panic or not. And that's going to bring us at some point later on to the theme. Now, this was written in the early 1950s, as I said. It's a near future kind of story. The Cold War was just kicking in, and there was a real fear, okay, of nuclear war, and that's why it's written in the near future. Now, the place, the setting, so this is the time, but the setting is extremely important. Hernando's in the middle of nowhere. We have no idea where he is. I mean, we can assume that it's northern Mexico because the highway's leading them to the United States, like immediately. Well, that's Mexico. We'll take it they're not far from the United States, so we're going to say northern Mexico, but that still covers a couple of hundred, 1,000 kilometers or so. I don't know. Very large, expansive place. But we do know that he's in a very simple, natural element. He's not in a city. He's not even in a village. He's just on like an isolated little farm in the middle of nowhere. Very simple, very natural, very beautiful, with the setting and the mountains and the river and everything. It's a very picturesque, as we can say. How does that contribute to the story? Well, we are there with him. When you read a story, it engages our imagination, and so we're there. We're living there. We're in Hernando's shoes. We're living at his pace. And we're seeing all of these things. And this highway is pretty much the only reminder that there's any real, developed big cities or urbanization or whatever anywhere. That's the only thing. And that highway means really nothing to him at all. Just kind of cars pass by and that's it. They take pictures of him and that kind of thing. And we'll come back to that in a few minutes. But the only reminder of any type of, let's say, technology or industrialization is that. And that, sorry, my phone just went off, so I just put it on silent. I forgot to put it on silent before I began. This focuses the reader there. We're there with him in the middle of the country. Now, we're not in the middle of the city, or we're not even in the car with the Americans. We're in a big rush, struggling to get home. And we're not in those cities that are being bombed and being destroyed. No, we're in the middle of nature. We're seeing things right in the middle of nature. And it's very significant when you think about it. That really does influence us and our perception of it. We only hear about an atomic war at the very end, or not. We're wondering, where are all these cars going? Why are they going? What's happening? And this perspective and this other way of life, that's us where we are, and that's whose eyes we're in, is significantly part of the theme over here. And we see this nuclear war. We see this nuclear disaster. We see this abuse of technology. Okay, but in my opinion, nuclear weapons are an abuse of technology. We see it from a completely different perspective. That's very significant. Finally, make our way to the theme. By having read the story, by having been narrated and brought into the mind of this poor Mexican farmer, Hernando, he's the hero of our story. He comes out of the story perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with him. There's nothing wrong with his farm, his wife. The clouds go away, the sun comes out, the river keeps going, whatever. There's nothing on the highway, but he never really cared about the highway anyway. And, typo over here that I can fix if you like me to later, but anyway, it's important. It's again focusing us to reconsider our way of life, because that's not how we live. We don't live in that very natural, very simple environment. We live in insane cities that are busy, 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 and more and more and more technology, more this, more that, more that, more this. And our theme then brings us, okay, so what is the theme? Okay, what does he want us to remember? Well, so he says the world, but no, I'm sorry, my friend. You are in your little bubble. Maybe you think that your world is the only world out there, but it's not. Instead, it's our world has ended or is ending. Okay, but that's not everybody on the planet. That's not the reality of everybody on the planet. Why not? Well, maybe we should really be simplifying things. Maybe we should be more human. Maybe we should be more natural. Maybe we should reconsider all of this technology and all of these nuclear bombs, and we'll, why not? How does the plot help build the theme? Well, again, we get that interaction, we get that culture clash over here, and we have a different vision, a different reality. So you're in a panic to get home because there's a nuclear war happening in your area, but it's not happening in his, and he's quite fine, and they're all quite good. What could they do anyway? And the setting again. So this simple place brings us back to a simple world and a simple character. But he's a good man, Hernando. He's an honest man, and he's a good man. He doesn't yell at people. He takes things. They get him to go run get his hat so they can grab pictures of him and that kind of thing. And he helps these people out. He gets them water. He rushes to get them water, and he doesn't want to hurt their feelings. And he's a very kind, good, and human person. Right? Yeah, there we go. Now with the narrative technique, I just have a few minutes, so I can let you, I'll go through this quite quickly, unfortunately, because like I said, we could spend hours on this. And I've taken the beginning and the ending, and I'll show you some of what I mean, okay? The first thing is you need to see Bradbury as a word painter. He's a poet. He paints with words, and his adjectives, his similes, his adverbs, and his metaphors are meant to engage you all the more in his story, in the setting, the characterization, the plot, and that contributes also obviously to the theme, because we sympathize with Hernando. We begin to like this character, and we begin then to identify more with him, which makes us perhaps be able to get more out of our own skin. The other way I see stories, and Bradbury's stories, that he's holding our hands, like our imagination, holding your imagination's hand, and he's walking us through his story. And he's done a very slow, relaxed, and very poetic style. And you walk through a story. Yeah, you read it, but you're reading it word by word, sentence by sentence, line by line. So here, for example, I used 3 different colors, and the red would be our adverbs and adjectives. Our blues would be our images. So there's the another river, as I told you about, a box that clicked, rich with gold things that told time. Well, those are watches. The clicking box over there, those are cameras. And so he's using these words. The way, again, we are in Hernando's world right now. This is the world through his eyes, and Bradbury is using these to bring us there, really create as much vividness. He walks slowly, shouting, someone, unusual, all of these things over here. Again, like I said, are words that are meant to paint images in our mind. And why? Because that contributes not only to an enjoyable story, but a good story that contributes to our theme and identifying with the character. All right. Now, when it comes to the end as well, again, I did the same thing over here. Okay, so these are all the adjectives and adverbs, and they're everywhere. But you also have some characterization in quotes over here. Burro, he says. What do they mean? The world. Okay, so we have this kind of, again, we're getting back into Hernando's world. He's using señor as well in there. It's nothing, he replied. And look at just this final thing over here. Okay, rich field, clearing sky, tilled land, deep river. This is very typical. Adjective, 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 adjective. Why so many adjectives? What's their purpose? Well, their purpose is to engage you, to bring you there. You close your eyes and you can imagine, you can smell, you can hear, you can feel. Why? And why? Not only is it a good story, but it's going to leave us with a good impression. And I'm almost done. Hope you're well. Adios.